The world of the continent takes place on planet Earth in the year 2090, almost 4 decades after the Battle of Aronia. The Battle of Aronia occurred in 2051 after interplanetary beings appeared on Earth, emitting radiation that killed over 3/4 of humanity and stealing most of the planet's livestock before blasting back off into the galaxy. Since then, the remaining survivors began to build a shared society in the heart of South America, seeking to rebuild the rubble and destruction into a place of hope and opportunity. Advancements in technology allowed the continent to quickly prosper, as it slowly became a self-sustainable society with schools, businesses, and effective political systems. Yet after decades of attempting to procreate and rebuild society, strange birth defects began to appear in newborns. These birth defects caused strange changes in skin pigment, certain facial deformities, and occasionally bizarre powers that transcend beyond regular human abilities. The bizarre powers are feared or criticized by the general public, while efforts to keep the bloodlines clean of genetic mutation resulted in strict laws and guidelines regarding these special individuals, labeled the defects by a majority of those living in the continent who don't have obvious genetic mutations, called the paragons. Those with obvious powers that are deemed hazardous to society are outcasted by society and forced towards the outskirts of the continent, next to the remains of what we once knew as Earth. Because the genetic mutations are often hereditary and recessive, bans and restrictions for having children are put in place for the carriers of the genetic defect. While some powers manifest themselves in various physical and more obvious forms, parents whose children are born with a genetic condition seek to hide their children's powers in order to not risk being banished to the outskirts of the city. The film takes place in the inner city of the continent, where we see the students of Kent High School walk into their first day of the school year. Jake Jones, an incoming freshman, acts as the protagonist of the film. At the age of 10, Jake first started to exhibit signs of the mutation. At times of intense anger or sadness, his body would spontaneously decompose into a cloud of smoke, before returning back to its physical state moments later. His parents, both paragons, had feared this event for years, and had worked tirelessly to put a plan in place in case the mutation was recessive and Jake developed the same obscure power that his grandfather had had. Jake learned important techniques to calm his mood in times of distress while out in public, and was able to suppress his emotions until he was in the privacy of his own home before exploding. His instilled beliefs of power being something that should be hid rather than embraced caused his character to become fascinated with science and medicine, and to obsessively seek to find a cure for the genetic mutation. In times where Jake sees small acts of petty crime, he transforms into the smoke and wards off threats to his friends and family. Now, Jake is forced to navigate controlling his powers in the midst of the trials and tribulations of puberty and high school. He's young and clumsy and desperate to fit in. As he works to suppress his powers while navigating life as a high school student, he meets some friends and foes along the way. Poppy acts as one of the primary villains in the film. She presents herself as your typical, pretty, popular paragon, spending most of her time in a catty clique of other paragons, yet hides a dark secret. In reality, Poppy's parents are both defects, but did not pass along the gene to their daughter, leaving Polly with only a slight pink skin pigmentation, but nothing else. Poppy constantly faces ethical dilemmas while bullying and taking down others for being defects, while suppressing shame that she feels towards her own parents. Georgie is a rising sophomore and the top student at Kent High, and he takes Jake under his wing after seeing him sitting alone at a lunch table. The two bond quickly, and Georgie reveals to Jake that he's been disguising his powers and is actually a defect, who has the power of thermal and X-ray vision, and seeks to use his power to study the recurring effects of the Battle of Aronia. Jake confides in Georgie about his own secret, and the two form an alliance to take down the paragons who bully the defects. Jane is the third member brought into Jake and Georgie's alliance after they find her crying in the hallway during class. Her genetic mutation causes the physical form of her body to liquefy in seconds in times where she's frustrated or upset. She faces increased difficulties in the ability to control her power as she's gotten older, and is very shy and timid after constantly being mocked and ridiculed by the paragons. Jake and Georgie convince her to join their team in a collective effort to take down the paragons that bullied her. Rocco is the fourth and final member of the group, acting as the risk-taker and proud defect. Born with the ability to shrink to the size of a soup can in seconds, his character embraces the mockery he faces at school and often gets himself in trouble for the various pranks and mischief that he causes. He joins Jake and his friends after accidentally hitting Georgie in the face with a miscalculated firework display during Spanish class, and soon the group begins to become close friends. Throughout the course of Jake and his friends' takedown of the mean Paragon kids, he faces difficulties in navigating his changing body and emotions in relation to controlling his power. In taking this idea and applying it to notions of growing up and adulthood in relation to moral and physical changes, the continent acts to accurately convey the character of the monstrous superhero. Foulati presents the ideas of superpuberty and the monstrous superhero in his analysis of the series Smallville. This series follows pre-Superman Clark Kent as he struggles with the prepubescent emergence of destructive, uncontrollable superpowers. Foulati coins the term monstrosity as means of expressing the conflicting internal and external forces that play against Clark Kent's ability to fit in the role of a protector. Peter Coogan explains how the primary characteristics that superheroes embody are often mission, powers, and identity. Superheroes are put in place to fight against evil in a way that must not be intended to benefit or further their own agenda, and should work to maintain order in the so-called villains. The monstrous superhero is a character who is morally corrupted after being perceived as a destroyer rather than a protector. As Scott Buchotman explains in his analysis of mutant superheroes, who fit into the monstrous mold, their first and most dangerous enemies are their own bodies. We see the ways in which Jake's biggest enemy is his own body as well, as he works to suppress his emotions in order for the Paragons at school to not bully him or see his true identity. He internalizes these feelings of shame and humiliation towards his extraordinary power. The show Smallville is largely about the danger of Clark's superbody escaping his controller, openly marking him as a freak, and we see the ways in which Jake slowly begins to embrace his ability instead of hiding it out of fear of public scrutiny. As Jake and his friends eventually succeed in taking down the cruel Paragons, they also learn to embrace the qualities that make them unique and put them towards a positive goal. Jake uses his passion for science and medicine to research how his powers and the powers of other defects can be used to help solve issues and protect others, and in doing so, teaches the characters to love themselves.